Probably the biggest advancements in the Core Series printer is that it's a standalone operation. In other words, it doesn't require a dedicated computer. Wi-Fi, Ethernet, and USB connectivity. The only key there is it needs to be on the same network or connected to the same router, in other words. No user calibrations. Yay!
That's awesome.
Yeah, we had a printer, it was called a B9 Creator. This is the B9 Core Series. And with our Creator printer, you literally could adjust probably 50 different parameters.
Wow.
And so the biggest challenge that I have is trying to help people undo all of the changes they did.
Yep.
But anyway, I love this printer because no user calibrations. It's so easy to use. Industry-leading speed. People love it for the speed. The DuraVat was actually designed for speed, so there are some sensitivities associated with that we'll talk about. High-quality LED light engine that's rated at 20,000 hours. The DuraVat is rated for 600 prints or 365-day warranty is the warranty on it. We now have DuraVats in the field that have over 1,500 prints and 2 years. So if they're taken care of, they will last much longer than a year. So were you able to register on the support portal?
Yes, I was.
We recommend you don't discard your box. If we run into a troubleshooting issue, then you will have a box to send it back to us. That is a rare occasion, but it's good to just have that box around. This is the accessory kit that you received in your shipment. The black plastic gloves are obviously there to protect your hands from the resin. It is a chemical based and we recommend using gloves. This plastic bottle, plastic white bottle, is used for isopropyl alcohol. Works great for spraying out real fine details in your jewelry. So if there's areas that the ultrasonic cleaning process with ISO doesn't remove, this bottle with ISO really does a great job in removing resin from small detailed areas. The red-handled spatula is the only instrument that should see the inside of the DuraVat. It's very pliable. It will not damage the surface of the DuraVat, the clear window surface. So just remember to only use this inside the DuraVat. Black scraper, green razor blade are used to remove prints from your build table. The nippers and tweezers are used to remove supports from your designs after printing. These are actually isopropyl alcohol filters. It does take a long time to filter ISO, but they're there for your use. The funnel and filter are used to remove any kind of particles from the resin. If there's any solid objects in the resin, it needs to be removed prior to printing. And this is a great tool to use. Microfiber cloth, you can use the microfiber cloth on the inside window of the DuraVat. Also, a microfiber cloth can be used on the build chamber glass, which is inside the printer on the floor, and the back of the DuraVat. Those surfaces need to be kept clean. We'll talk more about that upcoming. These are the filters for the fans in the back. I'll be showing you where those are located. Interface. You have the front door with a lip at the top, drops down in front of the printer when you open the door. Make sure you don't have a USB in here when you do that, because depending on the length of the USB, it can kind of bend that USB down, could cause damage to your USB. Main screen, touchscreen interface, and the function button is located here. The function button is really a kind of handy tool. It provides a lot of information to you. When you're booting up the printer, it flashes very slowly. When you're not printing, you can actually press the function button to put the printer to sleep or wake the printer. When it is printing, you can pause or resume printing. If the door is open, it'll flash very quickly. And also, when your print is finished, you'll be able to see that your print is finished by how fast the function button is flashing. So you can see that from across the room. We don't recommend pausing during printing because that can cause an artifact. Backside interface, these are the exhaust fans located at the top. Down at the bottom is just an air intake, so if you pop off these covers and they just snap on and snap off, you don't have to unscrew them. You'll see a hole down here. People call me up every once in a while and ask me, hey, you guys forgot to put a fan down here. This is just the air intake. These are the exhausts up at the top. The toggle switch is the only way you can power the printer completely off or on. So you cannot do that from the function button. This is your power inlet. The entire printer operates on 60 watts, which is very low power. Please make sure you only use our power supply with the printer. If you decide to grab your laptop's power supply and plug it in there and it's the wrong voltage, it can blow the light engine. Ethernet port is located here. The internal build chamber components include the DuraVat. There's two side clamps where the DuraVat is slid underneath those side clamps, and you press it back to a point where you see a green line that appears at the front. This green line indicates that it's been properly inserted. You'll also feel it snap into position. The build table is located here. It's inserted into this back arm. So here's a back arm here. And if you look at the back of the build table, you'll notice a notch. You insert it into that notch into the black section of the build table, and you tighten the lock knob down until it does not wobble. So you don't have to crank it, just tighten it down and kind of move the build table at the same time, and just so it does not wobble. All right, this is the most important part of the presentation. So if you guys are awake, this is the wake-up call.
Yeah, we're awake.
Okay, so the DuraVat is a very sensitive optical instrument. And I'm going to explain that a little bit by how it's manufactured. The top layer is thin film, as thin as a human hair. Down below that is a material layer, and the backside is optical glass. So as you can imagine, anything as thin as a human hair can be damaged by any sharp instruments. If you ever run into a problem where a stuck print is stuck onto this surface, we have a procedure that you can follow to remove that without damaging that window. The replacement cost of the DuraVat is about $1,000. That's why I'm making sure that you're aware of these precautions. And usually, if people follow these precautions, won't have a problem for years. All right, the max fill line is located here. If you fill the DuraVat to this max fill line, you can print for the better part of a day. Usually for a build table full of rings, all you need is about 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch over the aperture window. And it's easier to manage, less resin, because we want to have you check after every print that there's no solid supports or any solid objects in the resin. Because those solid objects, when they are over this window and the build table comes down on the next print, you can actually press the impression of those objects into that film. So that's why you need to make sure that the resin is clean. Here's some damage that's been done to DuraVats. In this particular case, a sharp instrument was used in here, and you can see that the thin film has been torn. You can see how thin it is from this picture. The resin ended up underneath, and in this case, the DuraVat is destroyed and has to be replaced. This is more of an issue that can happen by not following good practices. Do you have any idea how this could happen? This is the surface of the DuraVat, so this is the film that you're seeing.
Maybe trying to clean it improperly using a fork or something like that?
You know, great, you know, something like that. Any type of object that gets impressed into that film. So if you took a fork and pressed it into that film, it'll stretch it and cause a deformation. In this particular case, what happened, John, is the customer started a print and printed about 20 layers and aborted it. Anytime you abort a print, the front main display displays a message, open door and remove print. That's your key, and you actually cannot start another print until you do that. So you have to open the door. Well, the customer probably didn't even see this on the build table, didn't think anything got printed, even though it showed a layer count of 20. And opened the door, shut the door, and started a new print. And that whatever was on the build table just pressed into the surface of the DuraVat. So that area of the DuraVat is actually ruined. You can't use that area. You could use the other surrounding areas, but this area would not be printable. So that's how that happens. So it's always a great practice once you start using the printer is every time a print is finished, either open the door and remove the build table and clean it off, make sure there's nothing there prior to the next print, or just don't open the door. And I'm as guilty as anyone. It's lunchtime. I wonder if my print printed, and I'll open up the door and yeah, it's there. And then I don't want to clean it right away. I want to go have lunch because I'm a guy. And so I'll go back and close the door, and then, you know, if I start that print again with that object, it's going to ruin the DuraVat surface. So enough said about the DuraVat, but software installation, the core printer does not require any software to be installed by the operator. We do release firmware updates periodically, about every 3 months or so. Those updates include new material releases, print optimization, so we optimize the printer routines for optimizing the print results, and any bug fixes that we find in the software. The Create software is what you downloaded on your PC, and you indicated you already did that. Is that correct?
That's correct. Uh-huh.
All right. So have you connected your printer to Wi-Fi? Have you turned it on yet, or?
Oh, well, it wouldn't connect by a wireless connection, but I did connect it with an Ethernet cable, and it seems to be working just fine.
How far away is the printer from your router?
It's about as far away as it can be.
Okay, well if it's over about 15, 20 feet, that's probably the issue.
Uh-huh.
There's actually a Wi-Fi strength indication on the front main screen. I'll show you in a second what it looks like, but yeah, if you're very far away from your router, the printer's surrounded, you know, the whole printer is surrounded in metal, so that really attenuates that Wi-Fi signal. So even if you can get Wi-Fi with your PC, you may not get Wi-Fi using the printer just because of the attenuation of the metal on the printer.
Our jewelry store is in a shopping center, and if I'm trying to get on a network on my telephone, there's probably, without exaggeration, about 10 networks that come up, and
okay.
I didn't get any networks coming up on the printer at all, so I'm not quite sure if that's normal or not, but like I said, I was able to hook it up with the Ethernet cable with no problem.
Okay. We'll walk through how to set that up and talk about that in a few more slides later. And
okay.
And you know, if you want to connect it to Wi-Fi, I think you know, I've really never ran into a problem where we couldn't resolve the issue. So.
Okay.
So what we're looking at this on this slide is the workflow for the printer. So the left section here is the create software on your PC. Very simple. You import the STL, orientate and support, slice the design, and once it's sliced, it becomes a CPJ file extension. And once you've created your CPJ file, that can be sent to the printer via Ethernet, Wi-Fi, or USB.
I understand the import, the orient, and support, but what does the slice mean?
So slicing, what that does is it takes your entire design, including supports, after you've finished the supporting process. And when you select slice, it actually slices the design into the layers that will be printed on the printer. So are you familiar with additive manufacturing and how a 3D printer works?
How many layers would a normal piece of, like a ring or something, just generally speaking, how many would that be?
Probably, 700,
Wow.
depends on the ring, maybe 1,000, 1,500.
Okay.
And something, some range like that.
Okay.
So once you're over at your printer, and if you send the print to the printer and you go to the library file, you'll see that print located in the library. You can select that file, select the material that you wish to print, select the detail level, and hit print. It's that simple. And I've got screenshots of that entire process. Firmware, we talked a little bit about firmware. If there is a firmware update, this is the way you're notified. This orange box will appear. You can actually update the firmware from your PC by selecting this field with your mouse. The only requirement is that the printer has to be in a ready state, so not printing. Same with transferring prints to the printer. If the printer is printing, you cannot transfer prints either. You can select this field and it'll actually update the printer firmware even if you're in the next room, as long as you're connected via network. All right. The next field is the print library, and this is where all of your prints on the printer are stored. In this particular case, there's only one that's showing, but you'll see all of your prints that are on your printer once you select the print library. Down at the bottom, you can add a new print. So after you slice that CPJ file, you just select Add New Print and navigate to the file, open it up, and it'll be transferred to the printer. You can also download selected print or remove selected print. And these are, again, all on the Print Manager page on your PC. Custom materials will show all of the materials that have been released. And this is the area, so if you update your firmware, you may see new materials here. These are all B9 materials. You can also add a custom material down here. So if you wanted to use a third-party material with our printer, you're free to do so. It does void the DuraVat warranty because we just never know the settings and what type of material that you're going to be printing. You will have to specify the exposure rate if you do add a custom material. And that is something that B9 does not provide. We just don't know other people's material and the properties of those materials. All right, we are now at Q, and this is really a nice feature for individuals that may have, so if you do the design work, let's say, and you have an operator that's going to be operating the printer, you can set up a queue real easily by selecting the model, selecting the material and the quality detail that you want printed, and select plus, and it'll be added to this queue. You can change the order by these arrows over here on the right, and you can also lock these settings so that when the operator selects Q on the printer, that these have to be printed in the exact order that you specified. So again, you're actually setting this up on your PC, but it'll be shown on your printer. And once the operator selects Q, they'll see these prints, and they'll walk through these prints in the order you've specified. So, logs, basic statistics of the printer. It shows you your firmware information, type of printer. Download log package down on the bottom right here is for troubleshooting. If we ever run into a troubleshooting problem, we may ask you to download that log package and send it to us. It provides us some internal information about the printer is all. History, and again, this is on your PC. You can see the history of the prints that you've printed. If you select each print, you'll be provided with the material, the quality or detail level, the speed. So this particular print was 501 layers, took about 35 minutes to print. Now we're going to go into the print editor, but before we do so, I wanted to provide, to show you this highlighted orange area here. This is a B9 Create update, and when those are provided, you'll see this orange box appear. You basically select this on your PC, and it'll update the Create software that's on your PC, just like any other Windows or Mac update. So how familiar are you guys with 3D printing?
We've had the Matrix software for a while, but we really don't know that much about the 3D printing side of it at all.
Okay.
And I've researched a little bit of how to do it, and we just got the printer yesterday, so I've looked at the DuraVats and all the printing stage and all that stuff, but I don't really know that much about it.
Okay, well, we'll go through kind of an overview, and then I'm going to open up my Create software and make sure you kind of understand the basics. Okay. And again, this presentation, the link to this presentation will be sent to you at the end, so you don't have to take screenshots or pictures of this. I mean, you certainly can if you want. But so once you open up the print editor, this window will show up, and this is your build table, and this is where you're going to be adding your prints. You have two functions here, models, and you have controls over those models. You can select, move, spin, orientate, and scale models. And there's also a box that'll appear here once a model is added to the build table. It allows you to also change the parameters on the print. I think we lost a connection here because that next slide is, there it is. Okay. So once you select add, you're under models and you add, you navigate to your print that you want to add to the build table, select open, and it will be added to the build table. Cool. At this point, the next step is to orientate the design. And orientate the design, I'll go back one, you select orient, and you can actually move this with your mouse in any orientation. Also here on the left, you can change the rotational degrees, which will do the same thing, and you can also spin the design. So you can, realistically, you can reorientate it in any orientation using these XY rotational degrees and spin. So in this particular case, we orientated this at about a 45-degree angle. Do you guys print signet rings very often?
No, not yet.
Okay. Well, if you do, and just for your information, the way the printer works is it prints a layer at a time. So if I had this orientated vertically, like in this picture, when it gets up to this top section, every layer sticks to the DuraVat surface, and the build table, when it rises, pulls it off. So when you're printing large surface areas, it can cause some kind of it can cause a roughness on the edge. Just because that surface area is so large, when the build table pulls that off, it causes some stress lines on the edge. Some people call them build lines on the edge. So if you orientate large surface areas, as I did in this particular case, you're printing less surface area, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Each layer is less surface area, and so those type of issues get resolved. There is a document here. I would suggest that you kind of take a look at this orientation and support document. It basically walks through how to support jewelry, rings, signet rings, pendants, models, tips, print issues, and what we just talked about is this particular issue where, and this is a huge signet ring. This is 1 inch square for a Harley motorcycle biker. You guys ride Harleys? Anyway, what happens is, since it was printed straight up vertically, this surface area, you can see this kind of this roughness that appears on the side. And to eliminate that, you can do that by, reducing that surface finish. Sometimes you can reduce that by supporting. In this particular case, a support was put right in the middle, and you can see that it split the design. Mm-hmm. And so if you ever run into or start printing signet rings, real large signet rings, cross-support those signet rings, and this document shows you how to do that, so that you don't have one in the middle, because what's happening is the support is being printed, if you have one in the middle here, and it grows right into this top of the ring and will split it. Mm-hmm. So I got to get back. All right. So the next step is to support the design. You select supports. Under supports, there are add, delete, and modify. So you can add a support, delete it, or modify it.
I'm sorry, how did you get to that screen again?
So what you do here, this is under the print editor.
Okay.
And so we just added, so it's, if we go back, we look at this step, we're under models, okay, to orientate the design. Yep. If you hit support right here, yep, that'll open up your support tool.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so it's models and support. Once you select that field, you'll see the controls add, delete, and modify up here. There's also support parameters that you can change down here. Sometimes this penetration is too deep, so if you've got a real thin area that you're supporting and you see the support coming through the other side, you can reduce the penetration. You can also change the angle factor, the length, the radius of the top, middle, and bottom section, and also the shape. For example, the top, if you wanted to change it from a cone 25 to cone 50 or cone 75, that's available here. Usually the default parameters are good, so you don't really have to dig deep into that. We have a B9 Create webinar that is available. I'll send you the link to that, and it shows you in depth how to use these tools.
Okay, great.
You bet. So after you select Add, and we're in the support mode, and you navigate over the design, you'll see a contour line. When these contour lines converge into a minimal, real small circle, that indicates an area of support. It actually indicates a minimal on the design, a minimum, so it's an overhang, so to speak, and those areas need to be supported. You can also run into situations with flat designs. So if you're If an area is flat to the build table or parallel to the build table, it'll show converging lines at periods, you know, for areas that need to be supported if you run into that situation. And I'll show you on this picture coming up. All right, so once you click your mouse, a support will be added to every location that you click your mouse. And so in this particular case, we supported the entire underside of this ring, this matrix ring. We also have a tool called automated supports. Hey, I don't need to learn how to do supports. That's not quite true. You're going to need to do that, but we have people internal that the first thing they do when they support a design is to use the automated support tools. And I'd recommend that you start using the automated supports. It's not perfect. It's going to add supports that are not necessary that you may have to delete. And there may be some areas that you would have to add supports. So in this particular case, I set the support density to 23%. I'd recommend starting lower than higher. The higher density generates a lot of supports, so you know you can start off something low, select Generate Now, and this is what it did. So it looks real close to the one I manually supported, except this support's not necessary. It's actually trying to support a letter over here on the side. So you can select the delete support function and delete the supports not necessary. There's also a couple up here and one down here. And you're probably wondering how I know which ones to delete. And it's, you know, this is fairly obvious, but, you know, do I really have to support this edge? And that's kind of an experience thing. The printer actually will print horizontally by about 1 millimeter. So if you have a real, you know, an area that's horizontal to the build table and it's, you know, fairly small, it doesn't need to be supported. As an example, these letters alongside this ring.
If you do it manually, do you just click the mouse on the ring and it automatically shoots support down to the build table?
Yes.
Okay.
When I go to the live session, because I want to show you live how that all works.
Great.
You know, I'll show you how that's done and how it looks and
okay.
And what parameters you can mess around with. So, so once you have added your supports to the design, the next step is to snap it to the foundation or floor. And what that means is if you add a foundation, as I did in this case, I added a round foundation underneath this matrix ring, you snap it to the foundation. If you're just using supports without a foundation, you snap it to the floor. And we'll demonstrate that for you too. Now we're at the slice function. So we've snapped it to the foundation. And we have two options, slice and slice for surface finish. The slice function will slice the design without smooth surface finish. And it does take about 1/4 of the time to slice. If you use slice for surface finish, you can select this field and then hit the slice button and it'll begin slicing for surface finish. And the difference is between the two is if you use surface finish, it will smooth the edges of the print. So any build lines become smooth. You'll still see some build lines along curved areas of the print, but they're much smoother. The step size has been significantly reduced, and therefore the cleanup after casting becomes less.
And if you don't want that function, what do you do?
So if you don't want the function, you just unselect this slice for surface finish.
Okay.
Great questions. Thank you. After the design has been sliced, you can actually view the slices. So you're asking number of slices. So this matrix ring was 2,840. And if you select view slices, this window will open up. You can actually open this to full screen, and you can walk through each of these layers. If you want to go 10 layers at a time, you can use page up, page down. If you want to look one layer at a time, arrow up, arrow down. I typically do kind of a rough scan of the design and look for any type of red areas, which would be shown like this. In this case, I didn't support this overhang, and so when I looked at this particular layer, it shows all red, which is an indication that it's not supported adequately. And that's what you're looking for, is large red areas. You know, it's a algorithmic tool, so if you see red areas and it's just small lines, those are typically false errors. But any large red areas, you should go back to the design and say, is there adequate supports there and add those supports if needed.
Does it automatically let you know that there are any red lines or red layers, or do you have to manually go through it and search for them?
Yeah, you manually have to walk through them. So like I said, I usually, will look at, page up, page down, which literally takes just a minute or so.
Okay.
To view, and then I'll, if I see any flashes of red as I'm doing this, I'll, go back and hone in on those areas, make sure that I've adequately supported the design. Mm-hmm. So now you have sliced the design. It becomes a CPJ file, and you go back down, and this is your print manager again, and you can add new prints. You select add new print, a window opens up on your PC, you navigate to the university.cpj file, and once you select open, it's transferred to the printer. And before we go through the printer operations, I'm going to open up my Create software. We're going to kind of go through a little additional training since you've not seen this. So I've opened up the print editor, and here's my build table. It identifies the back and front of the build table. The first step would be to add your prints. So you select add, and I'm going to select this scroll flower ring. Yeah, millimeters look good. So it's added it to the build table. So the first step is orientation. And in this particular case, a vertical orientation will work fine for this ring. But if you want to orientate the design, you can select Orientate up here. And you can orientate it in any orientation that you wish by moving your mouse. You can also modify that orientation by changing these rotational degrees, A and B. If you select reset, it will reset it to the position that it was brought in as. So if I want to make this, let's make this 360. So there's 360. If I want to make this, if I want to round it off to some 345 or something, so you can see how you can change those rotational degrees over here. You can also spin the design down here. Below that is scaling factor. We haven't talked a lot about this yet, but resins, after you cure the resin, shrink. They shrink about 1 to 3%. So if you actually go in here and change this to 1.02, that's going to increase the size by 2%, which will compensate for that shrinkage. Not a lot of people use this. Some people do, some people don't, but it's there if you are doing a design that you need to really get as close to your design as possible. You can add the 2% in. And all I have to do is hit enter, and it crosses that over to the X, Y, and Z, and the entire design increases by 2%. Okay?
Yep, that's a great feature.
Yeah, it really is nice. Here's times where you can use that in other areas too. You know, if you're trying to scale something in just the Y direction by a certain percent, you can do that. So I'm going to go ahead and reset the orientation now that we know how that's accomplished. And since you're fairly new to 3D printing, I'm going to talk a little bit about it. So I'll go to the support to show you this. So here's your build table. And the way the printer works, additive process works, is that think of this line as layers. So each layer is printed upon the prior layer, right? Until the entire print is completed. The only problem is if you don't have a prior layer, so all of these have prior layers in this area. So down here at the bottom, for example, there is no prior layer, right? This is just sitting in midair. And that is the reason that you have to add supports to designs. And to do that, you select support, add. The best view is always the bottom view. And here's those contour lines. Remember we showed you those contour lines? See how that converges into a very small circle? When it becomes a real small circle like this, that is a minimum point in the design. I just click my left mouse and the support is added.
Okay.
Now, when I look at this support, I'm thinking to myself, there's no way that this little tiny support is going to hold this print to the build table, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this little tip, I always look at it from a surface area. So I've got this little tiny tip trying to hold this print as it's printing to the build table. So this would be inadequate support for this design. So to make that correct that situation, you select modify, select the support, and you go over these support parameters. You guys will probably add sprues to your designs.
Yeah, we do.
So, in this case, I'm just going to kind of, add my own custom sprue. So if I make this radius, 1.6, and then I'm going to go to the midsection, and I'm going to change this to 1.6. And that top, I'm going to make that 50. No, I want that to be 75. I want that to be covered. So now I've increased that surface area significantly to be able to support the base of that. And again, it's pretty much what looks like a sprue. So over here on the left, you can change all of those parameters, including the penetration. So that's why this doesn't look quite right. I think the default is something like in that area. So there we've got a really good base support for this design. It covers almost the whole edge. So you've got a curved section over here on the left that will print without having supports, but any surface areas that are flat need to be supported. So let's go back, look at a bottom view. We've added our first support. Let's look at the rest of this design and see what's going on. I'm going to select like light supports here. Oh, I changed it. So if you make a mistake, as I just did, Control-Z will undo the change that you made. So what I did is I had this selected and I made it a default support of light. So now what we'll do is we'll go ahead, I'm going to select this as medium, add, let's see what other issues we have. So all of these small circles here indicate areas that need to be supported. So this particular area, I added a support. You know, I could probably get away with something a little bit smaller, so you can make this light. That'd be about the right size support. So again, what happens when you add a support? Before I added that support, there was no prior layer. This was an overhang, right? And the way you can tell is any areas that don't have a prior layer that are parallel to this build table are an overhang. In this particular case, this area is located as an overhang. Here's another one, right? All of those areas. And once I select add and click on those areas, it adds my supports. So I'm just going to add the supports that are needed here in this one side, just to demonstrate. See the parallel lines here? Where I'm at right here in the middle of the ring. This indicates that this is parallel to the build table, this whole section. So instead of a circle, you'll see these converging lines. This indicates you need to support these areas as well. So those are pretty much the two indications that you'll see. Using auto supports, it should, you know, you should pick up most of those areas. So I haven't supported the entire both sides of this print, but I wanted to just show you what it looks like after you support something. So at this point, the next step, let's say we've supported this entire design. If we want to add that foundation that we talked about earlier, you select the foundation function over here. And there are several different foundations. Our favorite, the one I recommend to everyone, is the peel foundation, just because the edges are curled up. You can see the edges of this are curled up, and when you try to move prints from the build table, there's this foundation layer sticks quite well to the build table. So having that curled up edge really allows you to get the scraper or green razor blade under there to remove it. And you can change the foundation size if you wish. The thickness, I would recommend leaving at 0.5 millimeters, especially with signet rings, because it acts kind of like a strain relief. So when it starts printing those larger surface areas, it'll actually reduce the stress in the printing operation. All right, well, I want to print 5 of these rings. I don't want just one of them. I've got a huge build table here. You're going to want to change yours to the 530, which looks like this. So that's your build table area. And I want to, let's say I want to print 3 of these. So I go over to the models, select the ring, and then I want to duplicate. So there's 3 of them on. They're just randomly added to the build table. If you go over to the model tools and auto arrange those, it will auto arrange those on the build table. As you can see, it doesn't have enough room for the 3rd one, so it overlaps. If I change this to the 550, and now go back to my model tools, no problem arranging those, and you can add more of those if you wish. You can also remove a print from the build table by selecting whichever print you want and remove. If you want to move a print, let's say I want to move it over on the other side of the build table, you can do so by just selecting move. You have to have the model selected that you want move, and then select move up here, and it'll move it. One thing you'll want to note is when you're outside the build table, this red area shows up on all sides. So that's one way you can determine whether or not you're outside the build table. One interesting fact here is if you look at the top view And I'm going to move this just inside the build table. It looks like the top of this ring is outside the build table, right?
Yep.
So and that's because of the view that we're looking at is perspective. So if we remove the perspective view, now you can see that it actually is in the build table. So don't let that confuse you. You can actually print this design as long as that red section doesn't show up. Anything outside this area, though, will basically be cut off. So it just won't print. So once we have everything, we've snapped it to the foundation. We haven't snapped it to foundation here. Let's go back. So the next step is after you have supported it, you're going to want to snap it to the foundation prior to slicing. So I have two here. If you snapped it to the foundation before you duplicated this, it would already been completed. But you can see, did you see how it dropped it down a little bit?
Yeah.
And
so now snap to foundation, you can't move it, is that right?
No, you can still move it, but what it does is it optimizes the height. Most of the time it'll drop it down, and if you drop it down, if the height of the model is shorter, the print times are faster. So you actually gain print time, or the print time's reduced after it drops it down to a shorter height.
Yeah, okay.
Just because there's less layers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's the way that you can snap it to the foundation, or if you're not using a foundation, you snap it to the floor. So I think I've shown you everything on the tool. Do you have any questions? These are the basics.
You didn't do the auto support function. How do you do that again?
Sure. So I'm just going to go ahead and mess with this one. All I have to do with this design is start to change the orientation slightly, and it'll ask me, you want all the supports broken? I'm just going to say yes. I'll go ahead and remove this so it's easier to see. So let's just say you bring this in as an STL file and you want to auto support it. You go to your support tools. Up at the top, automated supports. I'm going to make this 23%, generate now, and the supports will be added.
Okay.
Okay, so, it did a pretty good job. I mean, yeah, there's some things that you'd want to delete here. So you select the delete button. You don't need this support. If you're interested in how this model works, it kind of emulates water falling vertically on the top of the design, and anywhere a drop is created, a support is added. So, so anyway, if you kind of think about that when you look at these, you can understand that, yeah, I can understand that a drop could, drop here. So this support was added and it's not necessary, so you delete it. Here's two supports on the same area. That's not necessary. This one up here is not necessary. So basically, you just walk through the areas that additional supports were added and delete, these duplicate supports, and you end up with a design that's pretty well supported. You want to make sure that you check this foundation to look at this foundation support here at the base of the ring. Obviously, we would want to modify that like we did before, and we can change that to a larger cone. Maybe I make this 75% and I change this radius over here to 1.6. And now we've got something that's going to support this design. Now, when I look at this, I think, okay, I've got a good support down at the bottom, but I want to also add a couple supports along the edge. It's better to make sure that it prints. And what I'll do is I'll add a couple of medium supports along here, just so I know I've got enough supports to print the design. So this is how I would support it pretty much. You'd want to make sure, in these areas you go through using the support tool after you've used automated supports. Just go through the automated support process and then look for other areas that would need to be supported. So in this case, you'd want to add a few more supports here. But you can see that it did add the necessary supports along these edges. Okay?
Yep.
All right. I'm kind of a stickler on supports that don't look quite right. So I can select these by holding down my shift key. I just selected all 4 of these, and I want to make those vertical. That's located over here at the left. I can also make them straight. Oh, that doesn't look good. Control Z brings it back to the previous step. I can also change these to these presets. So maybe I want to make these light or heavy, or you can actually set a custom support. So after you have, if you create your own custom supports over here on the left and select custom, it'll become a custom support for you for future designs.
Can you have multiple custom
designs? Just one.
Okay.
Just one, and most of the time you can do everything you want with these presets over here, light or medium. In this case, for this design, I'd probably select the mediums. All right. So here we are. We've snapped it to the floor, and here we can add our slice for surface finish or without. And once you slice the design, it becomes that CPJ file, which can be transferred to your printer. Usually what I will do is after I have a design and I've supported it, I usually save it. So I'll go up to File and I'll Save As. And it's going to save this print as a .cpj file, even though I have not sliced it. So I'll usually save it at this point. It does save as a CPJ file. If you try to transfer it unsliced to the printer will let you know that this file's unsliced. Do you want us to slice it for you? You can select yes, and it'll go through the process. So just because it's a .cpj file doesn't mean that it's been sliced unless you have went through the slicing process. All right. So what do you think?
Pretty cool.
Yeah, it is cool. So we were talking about Wi-Fi connection, and here's a little Wi-Fi strength indicator over here on the left. You'll see your IP address if it's actually connected. And this is the main screen of the printer. So here you'll see your library. So any prints that you transfer from the Create software, and you can transfer USB, Ethernet, or Wi-Fi, those will be located in the library. The print queue that's on the printer will reflect exactly what you set up in the Create software. Okay?
Yep.
You have a settings. We'll talk about settings in a moment. It shows you your network settings. You can change the name of the printer to John's printer or whatever you would like. Print history. If you select print history, it'll show you, the last 50 to 70 prints that have been printed on your printer. And if you select the print in print history, you can actually print from history. But of course, you'll have to print with whatever parameters, materials, and details that were originally set up, you know, for that print.
Okay.
If you select USB and have inserted your USB into the printer, it'll show you what's on your memory. In this case, you can update the firmware. You can or also transfer prints from your USB. This plus indicates that it was sliced with surface finish. So anytime you see a plus, that added process of slicing with surface finish was applied to that print. These two, no plus signs, indicates standard slicing. If you select the settings field and your network, basically the steps to connect to a network is to press your finger here to select Wi-Fi. Sometimes people get confused that they have to select this or Ethernet, but if you press this field, a check mark will be applied. Then you do the same thing here. You press this area and it will show your Wi-Fi networks. Did you indicate you were not able to find your network?
Yeah, I didn't press that select Wi-Fi network, so maybe that's why I didn't get anything.
Yeah.
I just thought it automatically.
Hey, when I first started using this printer, I'm like, well, where's the Wi-Fi networks? You know, so it doesn't show you anything. It's not like a scroll screen until you press that field, and then you'll see your network. So try that.
Okay.
And then the same down here with Wi-Fi password. Once you select this, you can add your password for your network, and it will ask you if you want to apply these settings. You say yes, and it will connect to your network.
Okay, yeah, that's probably my problem.
Yep, yeah, I did that too. So the advanced Wi-Fi settings just basically show your settings after you've connected. That auto field should be selected. Now we're going to go through the printing process. So we want to make sure that we have our DuraVats in position and filled with well-mixed resin. Always mix the resin. If you don't, the first half of the bottle will print fine, and the last half of the bottle will print nothing but failures or thereabouts. It's a chemical, you know, it's a chemical material, based material, and those concentration levels start to change if it's not mixed well. So,
okay.
Also want to make sure the build table's in position and that it's tightened down so it doesn't wobble. You basically select the print that you wish, and that print will actually show up as a picture over here in this field. Note the garbage can up here. If you want to delete this print for some reason, you can delete it. You can also delete prints by holding down your finger for a couple of seconds on a print. A menu pops up. You can delete several prints at a time. You can select whatever prints you want and then hit delete. Once you select continue, the next step is your material and quality level. In this case, we're going to print this with emerald. 50 microns is the recommended level. What we mean by recommended is it prints the majority of all prints well with that setting. You can change it to 40 or 30 microns if you wish. It does increase the print time because it's printing more layers. So 50 microns means that the layer thickness is 50 microns. Okay, so you have a 530 printer. Your X and Y pixel size is 30 microns.
Okay.
When you select 50, this means the layer thickness that you're printing is 50. So if you have something that, you know, if you have extremely detailed designs and you think that reducing that will help you, I would always recommend trying the recommended setting first and then going to different settings. But that's what these micron settings are, is Z thickness. Select continue. This is your overview. Prepare for printing. Basically, it just gives you the amount of time it's going to take, also the print volume, number of layers, in this case 707. Once you select print, the printing operation begins. At that point, you'll be presented with a progress dial. During the printing operation, you can pause or abort a print, but remember, we don't recommend pausing just because it can cause an artifact. If you abort a print, you have to start the print over. It will not, start over from where you aborted the print. So you have to actually remove the print from the build table, if you've got something on it, and start the print fresh.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you.
So print finished. Once the print is finished, you'll be notified on the main screen, print finished, open door and remove print. And this is the point where you actually always want to get into the habit of removing that build table immediately once you open the door, and not get into my bad habits of looking to see if it's printed okay, closing the door, because that reactivates the next print cycle, which can cause DuraVat damage.
Say that again.
Yeah. So if you open the door
Okay.
and close it, you can start a new print. But let's say, if you have a print that's finished and you've got something else to do, if you don't open the door, someone else can't come up to the printer and start a new print. You've got to open the door and close it before you start the next print.
Okay.
So it's kind of the precaution to not cause any DuraVat damage. Because again, that build table drops all the way down to the surface of the DuraVat. So if there's another print there, and we've seen that, I showed you that picture.
Right.
Yeah, so it can imprint that image or damage the DuraVat. We've seen a few of them come by our.
Doors open to remove the print.
Mm-hmm.
What was the question?
He was just reiterating what you just said.
Oh, okay. All right, post-printing cleaning procedure. We're almost done. I wanted to take a little bit longer just because you haven't used this software. So I apologize if, I think we had scheduled an hour and a half, so we're well within that. But the post-printing cleaning procedure is as follows. After the print's finished, first thing you want to do is remove the build table. So you want to get into this habit, remove the build table first and then the DuraVat. And that prevents resin from dripping on the build chamber glass. Remove the print from the build table, inspect the resin. So we want to make sure before the next print that there's no particles, no solid objects in the resin. If there are, you can use a used resin bottle and the funnel and strainer to remove those. If you want to go through the cleaning procedure, that you can do that at this point. I'll walk through that. That's the next section. If the resin is clean, you can perform the DuraVat recharging process. If you are going to start another print immediately, you can insert the second DuraVat and build table and resin and start your next print immediately. So what is this DuraVat recharging process? What happens when you print is the material layer that's underneath that thin film, it has oxygen in it. Oxygen's required for really high quality prints. And when you're going through the printing operation, it consumes that oxygen. So what we recommend is after a 45 to 60 minute print, to always recharge your DuraVat. So the process to do that is you basically tip the DuraVat so that window is free of resin and is exposed to oxygen. Sometimes when you do that and you look at that film, you'll see a white image. We call it a ghost image on the film. They wipe right off with a microfiber cloth. Just take the microfiber cloth and wipe it off. Place the lid on the DuraVat and recharge it for 45 to 60 minutes prior to the next print. And the DuraVat does need to remain tipped to do that. So we use a little block when we recharge our DuraVats. The DuraVat cleaning procedure is to remove the resin. The red-handled spatula is a great way to remove resin from the inside of the DuraVat. It will not damage that film. You want to clean the black sections of the DuraVat by wiping out the residue with a paper towel. So usually what I'll do is I'll use my funnel and filter, tip the DuraVat, and start, I'll put it in through the funnel and filter. And then I use that red-handled spatula to kind of wipe the majority of the resin in through the filter. And then I'll clean the black areas with paper towels. So I'll just wipe down those black areas. You'll be a little bit of resin left. But anytime you clean the glass window, you want to make sure, or the film area, you want to always make sure that you use the microfiber cloth.
If I do a print and then I'm going to do a print, say, in a couple of days, is it okay to keep that resin in the DuraVat, or do you recommend putting it back in the bottle?
You can leave it in the DuraVat. You always want to make sure it's tipped and the lid is on when you do that, because any kind of UV rays will expose that resin and begin curing it.
Okay.
So
So what you'll want to do when after 2 days, what happens is that resin, the chemicals start to separate. You'll actually kind of see swirls in the resin. So you want to take the red-handled spatula and mix that resin in the DuraVat. Okay.
And you just want to tip the DuraVat enough so that the resin isn't touching the glass. Is that right?
That's right. A
Okay.
few drops, John, are not a problem. So if you have if you wipe off that window, I usually use the red-handled spatula to just kind of wipe off the resin so that the oxygen or the air can penetrate through that thin film. And that's what happens. It actually penetrates through the thin film into the material layer and
Okay.
recharges it.
Okay. And also, I was wondering about after you do a print, you said that you want to remove the resin from the build tray, and we have a B9 cleaner.
Oh, good.
You would keep the resin attached to the table, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
And you can see in this picture, it might be a little difficult. The build table's right here, so you can just take the build table off, insert it into the clean unit. There's a hanger there. There's a an extended hanger or the standard hanger, depending on the print size. And you can just put the build table in and go to the bottom and select your time and speed and begin the cleaning process.
So on average, how long and what speed would you want to do, say, a table that has maybe 2 rings on it?
Slow, medium, and fast. So we usually use fast.
Okay.
And it really does a great job in cleaning prints.
Okay.
Cleaning the optical glass. This is basically the maintenance associated with the printer. There's two maintenance procedures. One, those filters on the back, when they start turning brown, you're going to definitely want to make sure that you change them out. The second is if you start seeing prints that look like this, where you have roughness on the surface, these white areas that are not supposed to be printed, or flakes being attached to the side of your print, there's 3 possible causes of this. Number one, smears on the build chamber optical glass. So when you open up your printer, the door of the printer, you'll see this piece of glass here. Right underneath that is the light engine. If your smears, fingerprints, resin that is smeared across this glass, what happens is when the light is projected and it hits those smears, it's going to refract it. In other words, it's going to, instead of project vertically, it's going to refract the light off of the smears in various directions. And that's what's happening here is it's curing resin that's not supposed to be cured. And the only way you can see those smears is to take a flashlight and hold it at the back of the build chamber. So my hand here is actually at the back of the build chamber and shining the light towards the door. So the door's here, your face is over here. And looking at that glass surface, and if there's any smears, it really needs to be crystal clear, because otherwise you're going to have refraction. You can use the microfiber cloth. You can use isopropyl alcohol on this glass. If there's resin, it's tough to wipe off. So in that case, you'd want to use a little bit of ISO and a microfiber cloth to clean that window. Just make sure that ISO will leave smears after it dries. So you always want to make sure that after you clean with isopropyl alcohol, you go back and clean it again after the ISO has dried, because it can leave kind of a haze.
Okay.
So number two, smears on the bottom of the DuraVat optical glass window. The same thing. The DuraVat sits right over this build chamber optical glass. So if there are any smears on the bottom of the DuraVat, the same thing can happen. The third possibility is the DuraVat not recharged. So let's say you're printing 5-hour prints and don't recharge the DuraVat, you can start to see roughness appearing on the face of your prints. This is what it should look like over here. So that's a third cause. Every once in a while, you may see this and you say, well, I've cleaned my build chamber glass, my DuraVat looks good, but I still see this stuff. You can validate that by downloading this CPJ file. So it's already a sliced CPJ, and printing it on your 530, it'll actually print a similar design to this. And you can look at it and see if there's any of this roughness that's appearing. My guess is always that there's still a little bit of haze somewhere. If you print this and you're seeing roughness still on your prints. Okay. Do you have a model clean or cure? I'm sorry.
Yes, we do.
Okay. So there's a few things we've learned over the years about curing prints. And the first thing is here's a dish inside the printer that you want to fill with tap water or deionized water. And you want to make sure that your model is submerged under the water, which improves the curing process and reduces the curing time. So that's a key to make sure that they're submerged. It just prevents oxygen from getting to the print, so they cure much faster.
Is it important to use the glass dish that it comes with, because it's fairly small? Can you use a different one that's a little bit bigger?
Sure.
Okay.
As long as it's glass, and so the key there is if you look at the bottom of this, when you pull this drawer out, there's a mirrored plated piece of metal here at the bottom, and the lights are all located at the top. So your UV lights are at the top. You're counting on that surface to reflect it up into the bottom side of the model or the sides of the model. Mm-hmm. So you want to make sure that whatever you're using is glass, not like Tupperware or something that's not crystal clear.
Okay.
You can orientate those models vertically, and if you do that, they get cured both sides. Sometimes prints are too large, so you may have to horizontally orientate those. If you do so, I would suggest flipping them and curing both sides to make sure, because you want to make sure designs are well cured for the casting process, and it's always better to over cure than under cure going into casting. The cure times depend on the parts of the size. Single ring 2 to 3 minutes, multiple rings 5, kind of similar to what we've seen over on the other side for cleaning. Heavier models 7 to 10 minutes. These ABC buttons can be pre-programmed to a set time if you wish. And when it's cured properly, supports and the base should snap off rather than flex. So people ask, well, how do I know? And usually when you bend something that's been cured about 30%, it should snap. It shouldn't just flex. So, if you take a support and start bending it after cure, if it doesn't snap after about 30 degrees, then you probably need to cure longer. It's just, some people you can use your fingernail, kind of wipe down the edge of the print and see if you end up with resin under your fingernail. I would suggest probably using tweezers or something like that rather than your fingernail, because it is a chemical.
So let's say I cure something and I go home and come back to work the next day and I find that it hasn't really cured right. Is it too late at that point to put it back in the curing chamber?
No, you can cure later. You can just repeat the process and cure it. And yeah, so no problem.
Okay.
All right. So this is Mike Joyce, our founder and CTO. And he actually did the majority of the design on the Core Series printer. Very, very interesting gentleman. He's also created Lost in Space, if you ever remember the robot.
Oh, wow. I sure do.
Yeah, so he's the creator of that along with his family. One of my first experiences here was I received a ticket about repairing a robot instead of a printer. So they had this picture of the robot in boxes and in pieces that needed to be repaired. So at the end of this presentation, there is the B9 Create webinar that I discussed earlier. I'll send you a direct link so you don't need to walk through this whole presentation, but you can look at different sections. So as you start your printing process and learning the 3D printing, you can say, okay, I want to look at the print manager, or I want to look at the print editor. So these different sections can be accessed by selecting these links.
Okay.
Hey, John, it's a pleasure.
Yes, likewise.
And we really appreciate you being a B9 Creations customer. And, we all know who pays the salaries around here and keeps the lights on. And it's not me talking to you. It's from having customers. And we value our customers very highly and appreciate your business.
Well, I didn't just, order up a B9 and hope for the best. I really researched several different printing companies, and they sent me samples. And by far and away, the B9 printed the smoothest with the most detail, and also the speed was a lot faster. So that's a really rare combination. So I'm really anxious to start using it.
Well, we're anxious to hear how it works for you and your success down the road with it. And, again, if you have run into anything, please just give me a call, or, you can create a ticket or get in touch with us before it becomes frustrating for you, because most situations are resolved pretty quickly with the Core printer. So.
Okay, good to know.
John, pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you, Joel. Have a great day.
Okay, bye-bye.